The core truth about Russia's failing war effort has just been delivered not by Western intelligence, but by a figure at the very heart of the Kremlin's military machine. The following analysis is based on the unvarnished assessment of Dmitry Rogozin, a Russian nationalist and self-proclaimed militarist whose views align with the most aggressive elements of the far right. Rogozin is the former head of Roscosmos, Russia's state corporation for space activities, a direct competitor to NASA and SpaceX, and currently commands the specialized drone center Bars Sarmat within the Russian occupation forces. This background grants him direct, operational insight into the battlefield's realities, making his public statements a shocking confession of systemic failure that completely dismantles the state's official propaganda. This is FPV Explainer, where we break down the most fascinating stories in drone warfare. If you're enjoying this deep dive, hit the like button, subscribe, and drop a comment telling us what topic you want to see next. Your feedback shapes our future videos and keeps us bringing you clear, detailed analysis from the front lines. Also, please watch this video to the very end, even if you play it in the background without sound, as your continuous viewing is critical to help promote the truth about the war. The first and most critical admission is that the front is in an unwinnable strategic deadlock. Rogozin, reviewing the map, confirms that the line is moving very slowly or almost not moving at all. He explicitly states that the pursuit of victory through current methods is impossible. The war has devolved into a brutal, self-defeating campaign of attrition that is financially and militarily unsustainable. This is a profound moment of truth. The most dedicated militarists in Russia are admitting that the official goal of military victory is unattainable. This paralysis is enforced by the catastrophic tactical reality on the front line. The war has been reduced to brutal, close-quarters combat fought by small assault groups, often just 3 to 5 men, in a landscape dominated by the lethal effectiveness of unmanned systems. Rogozin paints a bleak picture of the Russian infantrymen's reality, fighting in mined steppes, forced to carry heavy anti-drone gear alongside their basic rifles and ammunition. He starkly admits that the moment any military hardware, any vehicle, any piece of armor enters the 20-kilometer zone near the front, it will be burned. This is the definition of a tactical dead end, a stalemate where the conventional military advantage of a large army is entirely negated by technology. The pursuit of this war, therefore, is nothing less than a suicidal war of attrition. The current Russian tactics are a direct commitment to continuous self-exhaustion and loss. When faced with a military stalemate, the command has resorted to forcing troops into offensives that serve no strategic purpose other than to uphold a political lie. The military logic is inverted. Costly frontal attacks are prioritized over the defensive posture that the battlefield demands. This structural flaw ensures that the vast expenditure of human and material resources is yielding only a slow, painful rate of self-destruction. The army is consuming its own future, and the tactical deadlock is the physical mechanism by which Russia is guaranteeing its own strategic failure.
Rogozin's battlefield assessment moves quickly from the tactical deadlock to the primary cause of that deadlock, the catastrophic failure to achieve drone parity. This isn't a minor setback. It is the fundamental flaw that ensures Russia will remain strategically disadvantaged. Rogozin's own numbers are a stunning indictment of the entire Russian defense ministry. He starkly admitted that Ukrainian forces are employing 10 times more UAVs per day than their Russian counterparts. This gap is not a temporary shortage, it is a profound and sustained logistical failure. While Russian state media continually insists on overwhelming production, the reality on the ground, confirmed by a high-ranking military official, is a quantitative disaster. The sheer volume of Ukrainian drones, which Rogozin colorfully described as having more than a fool has machorka, tobacco, means that Moscow cannot sustain the necessary aerial reconnaissance, strike capability, or electronic suppression required for offensive action. The flow of Ukrainian drones is continuous, ensuring that even as Russian forces shoot them down, the supply is immediately replenished. This volume deficit is compounded by a devastating technological gap. Rogozin pointedly detailed the threat posed by Ukraine's long-range strike capabilities. He singled out systems like the indigenous Ludi drone, which he admits possesses a superb control system. This system allows the drones to reliably execute their flight missions and penetrate Russian territory, overcoming the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 10th echelons of air defense. Rogozin's estimate of 100 to 250 long-range drones flying daily into Russian territory demonstrates that Ukraine has achieved strategic aerial penetration using low-cost domestically produced UAS to strike deep military and industrial targets. This capability directly contrasts with Russia's reliance on foreign-source technology, highlighting Ukraine's superior organizational ability to integrate wartime innovation into industrial output. The industrial root of this impotence, according to Rogozin, is Russia's own crippling weakness, the lack of a developed micro-radio electronic industry. He laments the dependence on external components, explicitly calling for the creation of a specialized ministry to solve this problem. This is a tacit admission that the nation's defense industrial base, crippled by sanctions and decades of underinvestment, cannot independently produce the core components necessary for a modern drone fleet. The result is a reliance on a fragmented supply chain and foreign partners, which introduces instability and prevents the necessary rapid scaling of drone production. In short, the Russian army is not just losing the drone war, it is fighting a war in which it cannot even achieve drone parity. Until the core industrial weakness, the Achilles heel of microelectronics, is addressed with a unified state-led technical policy, the quantitative and qualitative deficit will remain insurmountable, guaranteeing the continuation of the tactical deadlock.
We have established the devastating military and technical deficits driving Russia towards strategic defeat. But the ultimate accelerant of this crisis is a purely political one: the leadership's profound and self-defeating paralysis. The refusal to acknowledge military reality by ordering a new, necessary mobilization of the nation's manpower and economy. This is the single, unresolvable contradiction that guarantees a slow, grinding loss. The strategic failure on the front line has created an inescapable military imperative. To break the current deadlock, to compensate for the immense drone deficit, and to conquer and hold a country the size of Ukraine, the military's own analysts, the most loyal Z-bloggers and insiders, have concluded that a massive force increase is required. The consensus demand is for a minimum of 700,000 to 900,000 fresh personnel to be mobilized to sustain the front lines. This is not a request, it is a strategic requirement dictated by the scale of the war. However, the pursuit of this necessary military solution is blocked by a crippling political fear. The leadership is utterly terrified of triggering a social and political crisis by admitting the truth of the war and ordering a new, massive draft. They understand that mobilizing the economy and society would instantly shatter the carefully constructed facade of normal life, leading to widespread domestic discontent and potentially destabilizing the regime. Their choice is clear. They prioritize the survival of the political elite over the military success of the state. This political cowardice ensures that the military problem remains unaddressed, trapping the army in a state of perpetual attrition. This political paralysis is compounding a profound internal moral crisis that is actively destroying the army from the inside. The failure to order a new draft means the state must illegally retain its most combat-experienced personnel. This perpetual service forces soldiers whose contracts have expired to remain on the front lines indefinitely. As Rogozin's own commentary confirms, this has created a core of deeply demoralized, exhausted, and angry veterans who know they are being sacrificed to maintain a political lie. The consequences of this are simple. Should the mobilization decree ever be lifted, this core of combat knowledge will likely abandon the ranks, instantly plunging the military into an even deeper crisis of expertise. Furthermore, the paralysis extends to the very sinews of the war effort, the economy and logistics. The military needs a complete industrial overhaul to solve its drone problem. Yet the leadership is unwilling to seize the necessary resources or mandate the required production lines. Instead, they allow the army to be sustained by a chaotic and inefficient patchwork of volunteer funding and market-based procurement. A system that guarantees a critical deficit of necessary equipment like drones and anti-drone warfare tools. The refusal to implement total mobilization, not just of people but of industry, is a profound strategic failure. It proves that the government is incapable of taking the necessary steps to secure victory, and this structural flaw is the single greatest reason the war remains unwinnable. The war continues not because Russia is strong, but because its leadership is politically weak.
We have analyzed the political paralysis and the structural military deficits. Now, we must address the ultimate, bizarre, and self-defeating contradiction of the Russian war, the profound psychological and moral collapse that sees the army fighting a brutal, unwinnable war against its own reflection. This is a level of self-betrayal that guarantees the war's continued futility and ultimate defeat. The core of this moral collapse is the army's failure to recognize its opponent. Rogozin's own commentary revealed the deep structural confusion within the Russian ranks, the admission that the forces fighting against them are, in fact, Russian people who are indistinguishable in their commitment and ruthlessness. He described the defenders as possessing the same character, the same ability to fight, and the same self-sacrifice as the forces Moscow claims to represent. This is a devastating admission. The army is not fighting an external foreign power that is easily dismissed as Nazis or Western puppets. It is fighting its own mirror image. This profound psychological truth accelerates the military's moral decay as soldiers are forced to kill an enemy that looks, sounds, and fights exactly like them. This confusion is compounded by a grotesque cynicism that defines the tactics of the high command. The war has been reduced to a simple, brutal body count, a constant, self-exhausting exercise in attrition. Rogozin's battlefield assessment highlights the absurd tactical cruelty. The enemy is engaged in an unending war of attrition, where the only goal is to make the price of victory so high that the other side collapses first. This cynical view of warfare ignores any political or strategic objective, reducing the soldiers to mere body bags in a political theater. The tactical consequence of this self-deception is the army's horrific acceptance of cruelty, which itself becomes a propaganda tool for the other side. Rogozin himself revealed the deep, structural contradiction. While he praises the bravery of his own troops, he simultaneously describes the Ukrainian forces as Zubarev maniacs who take pleasure in their kills, detailing the use of drones to terrorize wounded Russian soldiers. This narrative reveals the profound moral chaos of the conflict. Both sides are locked in a brutal cycle of dehumanization, but the ultimate responsibility lies with the aggressor, who started the war. This moral blindness ensures that the war will continue to be fought with extreme brutality, with little regard for human life, and with a relentless focus on inflicting maximum pain. The cumulative effect of this self-betrayal is a military force consumed by its own contradictions. The Russian soldier is fighting for a state that refuses to equip him, refuses to rotate him, and insists that he is fighting an enemy that looks and sounds exactly like him. This internal decay is the ultimate structural failure of the Russian state. The continuation of the war is nothing more than a desperate attempt by the Kremlin to postpone the inevitable political collapse, a tragic commitment to a war of attrition that will consume the future of the Russian nation.
We have analyzed the tactical collapse, the technological deficit, and the deep moral rot consuming the Russian military machine. Now we arrive at the final comprehensive verdict delivered by the very figures who sustain the war effort. The strategic failure is total, and the system's current trajectory guarantees defeat. The fundamental truth is that Russia cannot win the war of attrition it is currently fighting. The military is trapped in a profound, unsolvable dilemma. On one hand, the front requires a solution to the drone deficit and the manpower crisis, a solution that only a total, immediate mobilization of the economy and a draft of 700,000 to 900,000 men can provide. On the other hand, the political leadership, fearing the inevitable social chaos and political collapse that such a mobilization would trigger, is absolutely unwilling to authorize it. This political paralysis ensures that the military problem remains unaddressed, guaranteeing the continuation of the stalemate and the continuous, self-exhausting attrition of the existing army. This internal contradiction is compounded by the structural dishonesty that defines the Russian state. The military and political leadership are incapable of correcting their course because they are caught in a cycle of lies. They continue to reward commanders for political loyalty rather than military competence, ensuring that mistakes, such as the adherence to the suicidal human wave tactics, are never rectified. The official narrative, which insists on ignoring the technological superiority of the opponent and the profound internal rot, ensures that the army is structurally incapable of adapting to the realities of 21st century warfare. The tactical deadlock is the visible symptom of a system that is fundamentally incapable of telling itself the truth. The only way out of this dilemma, as acknowledged even by some hardline Russian strategists, is a revolution from above, a radical change in leadership that would allow the state to admit its failures and implement the necessary, painful reforms. But this is a desperate, unlikely fantasy. The current leadership, consumed by its own political survival and self-interest, will continue its policy of denial and delay, hoping that the cost of the war will be externalized onto the soldiers and the economy. The final verdict, however, is sealed. The war is not just consuming the Russian army, it is consuming the future of the Russian state. The continuous expenditure of human and material resources on a war that the military itself admits is unwinnable is an act of national self-destruction. The cumulative effect of the military strategic blindness, the technical deficit, and the internal moral collapse ensures that the system is on an irreversible trajectory toward disintegration. The war is lost, and the only question is how much more will be sacrificed before the inevitable political and financial collapse brings the conflict to an end.